are making some buttermilk biscuits. So buttermilk biscuits is a rolled biscuits that you traditionally see in the southern part of the United States. And typically with our baking ingredients, we use all-purpose flour. With biscuits, you might use soft lily flour, which is a flour that is specific to the South. And it just basically has a little bit more starch and a little bit less protein to make a tender biscuit. All right. And this is a rolled biscuit, which means you could roll it out. The other type of biscuit that you might see is a drop biscuit, and that biscuit has a little bit more moisture in it. And then instead of rolling it out, what you would use is you would use a scoop to actually scoop it onto a baking sheet. All right. So with biscuits, we're going to use some all-purpose flour. And what does flour do to recipes? Who remembers? Provides what? Provides structure, right? Yeah. Structure, that's what flour does. All right. And I need 2 cups of flour. Now, sometimes you could also see biscuits that are made with self-rising flour. Does anybody know what self-rising flour is? Anybody? No? All right, so self-rising flour is flour that has baking powder as well as salt added in it. So you could literally take a cup of flour, add a teaspoon and a half of baking powder and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and you make your own self-rising flour. I typically don't, because I like to customize exactly how much salt I put into my ingredients. So in this recipe, it calls for 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So with baking powder, do I need an acid for baking powder to work? No, not with baking powder. How about baking soda? Yes, okay. And my recipe calls for 1/2 teaspoon. So again, I'm just gonna level that out. And what do baking powder and baking soda do to recipes? Those are chemical leaveners, which makes things rise, okay? Makes things rise. The next thing we're gonna add is salt. And does anybody know what salt does to a recipe? What does salt do? Doesn't give sweetness, it enhances the sweetness. Okay. And the last thing we're going to add to our dry ingredients is some sugar. What does sugar do to recipes? It's sugar. Is it salty or sweet? Sweet, so it provides sweetness. Very good. So we're kind of making a savory biscuit, so it only calls for 2 teaspoons of sugar. If you were making sweeter biscuits, maybe for like strawberry shortcake, you would add maybe like a 1/4 cup of sugar, okay? So the next thing that's gonna go into our biscuits is fat. And fat provides a little bit of tenderness. This is what? Anybody know what kind of fat I'm using today? It's solid at room temperature.
Ice cream?
This is not ice cream. Sometimes when you see like ice cream on TV though, for like food styling, they will use this as ice cream. So your thought isn't that far off. So this is shortening, all right? And it's basically chemically processed, hydrogenated oil, and that chemical process makes it solid at room temperature. So when it comes to biscuits, a lot of people like shortening because it's easier to work with. I prefer when I make biscuits to use butter, but for classroom purposes we use shortening. Butter is actually a little bit harder to work with, and the shortening is a little bit more forgiving. So you could sift this out, but for time purposes, I'm just going to whisk my dry ingredients so they're all fully incorporated. and it evenly distributes all of my chemical leaveners. So I'm going to use shortening to cut in to my flour. Anybody know what cutting in means? So you're basically going to use some tool to break up fat into flour. All right, that's what cutting in means. So you could use a fancy tool called a pastry blender, but raise your hand if you have one of these at home. Anybody? All right, I have one and I don't use it. What does everybody have fingers? Yes, everybody has fingers. And the nice thing about fingers is that everybody has them. And if you use your fingertips, that's actually the coldest part of your hand. And that's why you want to use your coldest part, because you don't want the shortening to melt in the bowl. You want your shortening to melt in your hot oven. Because in addition to our chemical leaveners, right, you're also going to use the leavener of steam. So what's going to happen is the fat is going to convert into liquid and then steam, and it's going to make a nice tender biscuit. So I'm basically using my fingers and I'm just kind of twisting my hand, if you will, to break this into small pea-sized pieces. And again, that fat adds a little bit of tenderness, and I'm just about there. So I'm gonna stop right there. So I don't have buttermilk. What I do have is a little bit of sour cream and milk, and I'm just gonna whisk that with my whisk. So the buttermilk's going to add a little tang, for one, and then it's also going to help that leavener do its job. Which leavener? Baking soda. Okay, baking soda. And then you could use your hands or you could use your spatula, and you're just going to mix this until you see it to start to form into it's like a soft ball, and then it could use just a smidgen more liquid. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of straight milk. And that was just like another teaspoon. And I'm actually gonna add a little bit more. So that was maybe another teaspoon. And you see it come clean away from the sides of the bowl. That's how you know you're almost there and it forms a ball. Now, typically when people roll it, they would roll it onto a floured surface. I like to demonstrate rolling it onto some plastic wrap because most people have plastic wrap at home, and it's as easy as this. So you're gonna take your biscuit dough. You're going to dump it onto your plastic wrap. Okay. And then I'm going to take my plastic wrap, and you could say this is kneading. Okay, so I pat it into an even thickness. So that was 1, that was 2, that was 3, and then this is gonna be number 4. And that's how much I kneaded it. The only thing is it's not the same thickness, so I'm just gonna use my hand to pat it to the same thickness. Okay, now we're going to, now that we've rolled it out with our fingers, now we're gonna cut out our biscuits. So when you cut out your biscuits, you're gonna cut them out onto a piece of parchment, and I put them on some parchment because it's just easier to clean. All right. I have my biscuit cutter. If you don't have a biscuit cutter, you could, if you have a measuring cup, you could use that, but just cut it on the edges. Okay. Or you could use the inverse side of a cup. Okay. So I'm going to take my cutter and I put it into some flour because that coats it. It kind of gives it a non-stick surface. And then I'm just going to lift it up and then relocate it to my tray. So again, flour. So I call these my first round biscuits, right? They have the most perfect edges. I call my next section of biscuits my second round draft pick of biscuits. Why are they like that? Because you're gonna manhandle them just a little bit more. But you see, I'm really just, my handling is very gentle. Okay, I'm just trying to get it as even as possible without kneading it too much. And I'm trying to get it an even layer. So I get 1, 2, and then with this, what I'm gonna do, this will be my third round draft pick of biscuits. I'm just gonna use my plastic wrap to get it maybe into a rectangle. And then maybe these, I'm just going to cut them with my dough scraper to get 2 more. So if yield is how much a recipe makes, how many biscuits did I make? Eliza, what do you think? I made 8, okay? That's how much this recipe yields. So you've made your biscuits. Now you're gonna put them into a 450-degree oven for about 9 minutes, okay? So I'm gonna put them in the middle rack. Timer, 9, start, and done. All right, our biscuits have baked for 9 minutes, and they have risen beautifully. They are nice and high and golden brown, and we are going to let them cool. All right, so you can eat them as is, or you can slice them open with a little bit of butter, some honey, or you can make some strawberry shortcake out of these. They are absolutely delicious. I love you all. Have a beautiful day.